That incident happened in August. When I came home from work, my neighbor Marky was sitting on a folding chair on the lawn in front of the house. He smiled and waved at me and said hello. I waved at him and asked him, how was his day? Great, thanks Jim. The child has started kicking me, she said while caressing her stomach. I said smilingly, he would definitely be as energetic as his father. At this point we nodded at each other. That night I went to the shop near my house to buy things. I didn't expect that the Marquis would still be sitting there on the chair. He must have slept. I hoped Deem wouldn't forget him. Although it was hot during the day, it started getting a little cold at night. While going back, I looked again and saw that her husband was next to her. They were discussing something, so I decided to leave without disturbing them. Next morning, I woke up late. My job was in 2 shifts, so I could sleep till noon. Marky sat there again. This time, Nimu started studying with a coffee table and a jug of water. It's nothing special. I've never noticed anything like this, so what does it mean? But in a way it's not normal anymore. After a week, I woke up in the middle of the night, and my conscience told me to look out the window. She was still there, and the car was ringing 3 stages, but my neighbor was sitting on that chair, and I was sleeping under a blanket. I don't understand modern parenting and women giving birth, but who am I to judge? Maybe this is a new trend, good for immunity or something, you know, though I was a little surprised and a little worried. But then I forgot about her. Soon it became a thing, and every day I used to see her sitting on that folding chair. As the days went by, her belly got bigger and bigger. I am not a special lady, but my conscience tells that the day of birth is coming soon. Soon in mid-September, the leaves will start falling and it will start raining. But that didn't stop him. They had raincoats and umbrellas ready, and he just smiled at me and waved, sometimes even pushing his husband close to him. Over the next few days, the temperature dropped dramatically, but these weirdos never stopped behaving. I'm a normal person, so I don't mind my own business, but things are getting weirder and weirder. A few times, I came up to chat and asked them how things were going, and were they worried about Marky catching a cold. Wouldn't that be bad for the baby? But they laughed it off and said they had a solution for every situation. I noticed that Marky's belly had grown quite large, almost astonishingly large. I have seen pregnant women many times. I saw a woman who was about to give birth, but I thought it would be rude to ask her if she had a baby, so I didn't ask. It's finally October, and my crazy neighbor doesn't care at all. Even he sits there, even when the dead gas around him begins to cover the windows. You know what the weirdest thing is? No one thought anything was wrong. Other people on the street brought him goodies, stopped to talk to him, but none of them thought there was something wrong with him. Then one morning something happened. Her husband set up a tarp tent next to her, the kind they sell hot dogs in at the fair. He also put a heater in it, or I guess a heater, because there was a wire sticking out of the living room window. I ran into Dim coming out of the grocery store with 2 big bags of food. Hey man, I don't want to be nosy, but are you sure Marky's okay? I asked. This is kinda weird, it's getting cold outside. Are you sure it's okay? She replied, yes, don't worry, she's feeling fine. Thanks for asking. I couldn't help but notice how pale she looked. She tried to hide the dark circles under her eyes with a smile, but it was impossible for me not to notice her exhaustion. Time passed. I hadn't seen Marky for weeks or so, because he was hiding in the tent, and only Dim was running back and forth with food, hot drinks in thermos cups, books, medicines, and whatnot. At one point, I noticed the tent cloth shifting back and forth, as if the woman was stretching inside, or maybe her husband was giving her a massage. It was strange, but even stranger was the sound of the voices. I was awakened by the noise in her tent and immediately rushed over to see if everything was all right and if I should call an ambulance. But Dim stood at the entrance to the tent and said that everything was fine, that the baby was about to be born, and that everything was fine. It's just muscle cramps and back pain, she said. Don't worry, I'll be with her all the time. But her voice never stopped, as if she'd never gotten a moment's relief, which became the norm. The company became my new home, so that I could escape the horrible voices that echoed through the quiet neighborhood, distracting me and preventing me from sleeping. The earplugs don't help because even with them in, I know they're still there. The really scary thing happened yesterday when the wind was so strong that some of the tent pegs didn't hold. Raymond probably fell asleep exhausted and didn't react quickly enough. I don't have a better explanation, but anyway, the side of the tent opened up. It felt like the poor woman needed help, and no blanket or windbreaker would have gotten her through the bad weather, especially since she was pregnant. Being a good neighbor, I stood still and walked over to the fallen tent and asked, "Marquis, do you need help with this tent?" All I got in response was a groan, and I stood there with no reasonable reply and no idea if she was okay. So I decided to take action. I grabbed the fabric on the side of the tent and pulled, and then the sight of the tent froze me in my tracks. I stood there with my mouth open, my vision resisting what was in front of me. It was still dark outside, and I could only catch a glimpse of the inside through the cracks, but that was enough to traumatize me for the rest of the day. What was there was not a horse track, at least not the one I remembered, but a huge bubble of flesh lying in front of me, covered with horrible tough body lines. I couldn't see the whole thing, but it was huge, wobbling like a bowl of jello, and as it did so, it made a terrible figure and emitted the putrid odor of something rotting. The stench hit my nose, and my eyes immediately welled up with tears. I couldn't look at it any longer, so I turned around and ran, not thinking carefully, just wanting to get out of there as fast as possible, as far away as possible. I ran to a friend's house on the other side of town and called the police without giving them a reasonable explanation. You know what the police said? "Sir, do you have a penchant for spying on pregnant women?" Dim has been calling me, texting me. What the hell is going on? I don't know what My credit cards, papers, everything was in that house. But I didn't have the guts to go back. I almost broke my cell phone when I mustered up the last bit of courage to check the message from Dim that said, "Hey Jim, little Dim was born, and we want you to be his godfather. After what you've been through, we won't allow you to say no."